Hello and welcome to the City Nature Calendar Nature Track. Over the bank holiday weekend, over 3,000 people were out snapping photos of the nature on their doorstep and sending them in via the free iNaturalist app for the International City Nature Challenge. This year, the challenge saw over 400 city regions worldwide take part, including 14 in the UK, all working together to help put wildlife on the map. Across the UK, over 54,000 wildlife observations were made, which is amazing. The chance to actually take photos in the field is over now, but we do have a few days left to upload and process all our sightings from the weekend before the final tally is announced on Monday, May the 10th. So we're asking people to help identify some of the unknown species that they found and then pick out the highlights. We've got full instructions on how to take part in this via the link in the video description. And to help out, we're meeting a series of live chats with UK wildlife experts this afternoon. And here I'm pleasure to welcome Julian. And do put any questions for him in the comments. And Julian, thanks for joining us here today. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what is it you do?
Hi, Victoria. Yes, and thanks for the opportunity for the invite on this. I've worked for the RSPB in different parts of the UK, but most recently in Wales over for the last 30 years. I kind of, as well as that, so at the moment I'm head of what's called head of species for RSPB Cymru, so I'm looking after all of our species recovery work and our species policy work in Wales. But prior to that, until a few years ago, I was the reserve manager of our Conwy Reserve on the North Wales coast, which is one of the finest wetlands, the sort of pocket wetlands I can think of, really, and close to a busy area for visitors, so a really great place where people can kind of come and experience wildlife very easily, almost right next to a busy trunk road and railway line. But it just shows the amazing wildlife that you can find in surprising places. And so if anybody is sort of having a visit to North Wales this year, I'd thoroughly recommend popping into the Conwy Reserve.
Oh, of course, and the City Nature Challenge is always about finding what is there right next to you. So the idea that you don't have to go too far or need to go to exotic places. So can you tell me a bit about what got you interested in birds, how you ended up working for the RSPB?
I can't really remember a time when I wasn't interested in birds, to be honest with you. The RSPB's junior section used to be called the Young Ornithologists Club.
I was in that as well.
Yes, you might remember a little sort of silver kestrel badge, and it's now Wildlife Explorers. And as a result of the name change, it's become a much bigger organisation, more engaging, inclusive organisation. But the Young Ornithologists Club was I was a member from when I was about 6 years old, I think. And I was very lucky. My grandparents lived by the Dee estuary, which is the big estuary between Wales and North Wales in England. And so, just kind of taking my grandparents' dog for a walk when I was a kid, you'd hear the redshanks in the marshes. You'd see the gulls and maybe yellowhammers along by the golf course. And it was just that sort of thing. Well, what are they? And you stop to watch and you just kind of get more and more into it. And as a kid, as a teenager, I was very lucky. There was a group of other like-minded teenagers locally, and somebody who kind of was prepared to organise us, and we got involved in all sorts of little local conservation projects and sort of discovering the birds of North Wales. So I was just very, very fortunate.
Oh, fantastic. Yes. I mean, I'm mainly an entomologist, and a lot of people say entomologists' dirty secrets, they start as a birders, and I'm afraid it is true for me. I did start off with birding before moving into other groups, and they're great group to start with, really. Absolutely.
And actually it also goes in the other direction. It goes in the direction lots of birders become, in the summer, when birds become really hard to find, lots of birders get really into particularly dragonflies and butterflies. And I know a lot of bird watchers who kind of contribute to butterfly and dragonfly recording schemes because, during June and July, after the breeding season's over, before autumn migration begins, you don't see so many birds, but you go in and you discover the invertebrates. And I know people who've got into spiders through that route and all sorts of things. So yeah, I think that's probably true. We all start as a birder. Maybe I was less good because I didn't progress much beyond that.
That's one of the nice things about wildlife watching. There's something for everyone, isn't there, and everywhere, and whatever you're interested in. So, well, speaking about birds, then, what would be your kind of top recommendations if you're just starting out and you're not quite sure where to start with identifying birds, maybe just starting off in your back garden? What would be your recommendations?
So starting in your garden is absolutely the place to start, because the good thing is there'll be a limited range of species. So in total there's 650 different bird species have occurred in the UK, and there's about 220 kind of regularly occurring species. So that's a lot. There's a lot to kind of deal with. So don't bite off more than you can chew. Start with a relatively modest place. Get to know somewhere really well. That might be your garden, where you've kind of got maybe 15. If you feed the birds, and you'll live in an area with some surrounding habitat, you might get 15 to 20 different birds coming into your garden. So get to know those first, because once you know those well, when you go off somewhere else, you'll be able to pick those out very easily, and you can concentrate on the things that you don't recognize. Similarly, then broaden your horizons. Through lockdown, as everybody was doing, their daily exercise, their local walk, people were discovering places, that they were going back to again and again. And a lot of birders love a local patch, a place that you really get to know. I've got one. Mine's very lucky with mine, because mine's a limestone grassland on the coast with seabird cliffs, so it's a pretty good one. But it doesn't kind of matter where it is. It might just be your local park or a bit of scrub or whatever, but somewhere that you get to know, because over the course of the year you'll get to see the changes. You'll see, the great thing about birds, of course, is you kind of get a slightly different suite of birds in the spring and the summer to the autumn and the winter. So getting to see those changes and getting to kind of pick up on those is really good. And once you get to know a place really well, over a number of years, then in your own way, particularly if you're recording those in some way, you'll be able to track the changes in the bird life that's in your local patch.
Yeah, and you're talking about tracking in your local patch. That's quite nice to link into how kind of recording birds in general can be important for sort of wider kind of data on changes in the landscape. Can you talk a bit about some of the kind of projects involved in that, and how kind of the recording can help towards the bigger pictures?
Absolutely. So for me, it's at kind of sort of multiple levels, and this is City Nature Challenge and BioBlitzes are a really good place to start, because it hopefully gets people into you capture the bug of recording stuff, and then you can kind of take it on as your own skill and knowledge grows. You can kind of you can get involved in different recording schemes. So for example, at a very simple level, the RSPB every year organises the Big Garden Bird Watch. Happens the last weekend of January every year. It's been running for about 40 years. And this year, over 1 million people took part. And that's phenomenal. That is amazing numbers, just brilliant. But because there's so many people taking part in their gardens, and it's just a snapshot, it's 1 hour. It's 1 hour in a whole year. But over time, over 40 years, that gives us an interesting data set. And you can track the fortunes of some of the birds species in gardens that we've been able to see, that we've tracked through other more formal monitoring schemes too. If you kind of do that and you think, oh, that's really good, I really enjoyed that, I want to do it every week, or I want to do it every day, then BTO, British Trust for Ornithology, has a garden birdwatch scheme where you actually record the birds every week, and it's all online now, so you put the data in, and through that, over the last 25 years, they've been able to document, and we can see the changes in birds' use of gardens, such as, for example, blackcaps using gardens more in the wintertime, birds like goldfinches coming in because of the sorts of foods that people are putting out, things like Niger seeds and sunflower hearts. People are able to, you see that trend in the increase in use of gardens by goldfinches. So that's kind of, you can do that very locally, and lots of people do that because maybe they're not able to travel. Maybe it's something they can do from their kitchen window every day. And then obviously, as you kind of get more into it, there's other things. There's a brilliant thing called BirdTrack, birdtrack.net. And that's a joint enterprise between the BTO, RSPB, and then Birdwatch Ireland, Scottish Ornithologist Club, and the Welsh Ornithological Society. The beauty of BirdTrack is that all you do is you download the app to your phone, or there's obviously an online portal as well. And if I go for a walk, if I take the dog for a walk, I can just click on where I'm going today, because my phone knows where I am. And just as I go along, I just enter the list of species that I see.
Oh.
I can add numbers. I can put breeding evidence, perhaps. That's always really valuable extra information. But just having the list is valuable in itself, because there are hundreds of thousands of lists get uploaded into BirdTrack every year. And because you can then look at the data and the proportion of lists on which a particular species occurs, like magpie or robin or blue tit, then you can see over the course of the year how that population changes, and you can compare multiple years. And it's been going for about 15 years now, so there's quite a good, quite a lot of information there. And that involves no extra effort on my part, because I'm going for a walk anyway, and I'm just going along. But it really adds to the richness of my enjoyment of my walk. I've got access to all of my records, but so has, for example, the county recorder. So there's a network of volunteers, county bird recorders all over the UK. Big shout out to them, because they do a huge amount of work, and it often goes unrecognised. But they collate all that information, and they produce a county bird report. I'm actually the editor of the Welsh Bird Report. I collate all the information for the whole of Wales, and we publish it as Welsh Ornithological Society every year. And we couldn't do that if we didn't have all of those records coming in through BirdTrack and all the other schemes, the local record centres. Here in Wales, we have a separate app for Lurk Wales, and I don't put my bird records in there, but I do put all my other records of everything else I see when I'm out and about. So, as I say, there's that kind of tiered approach. And then, for people who feel pretty confident about their bird identification skills, there are schemes where you go back to the same place either every month or every year. The Wetland Bird Survey and the Breeding Bird Survey, which are the kind of two main schemes by which we're able to monitor bird populations at both a county level and a country level and a UK level. And the great thing is we've got data going back 50 years for some of those schemes, and for Webbs, and 25 years for the BBS. And that's a really rich seam of data. And lots of other countries have caught onto this now. But the fact we've got such a long run of data is the reason why, when State of Nature was published, State of Nature is produced by lots of organisations every 3 or 4 years. There's a rich amount of data in there going back to the 1970s for birds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's a great range of different things to get involved with. Kind of whatever your level there, that's really great. We've had a question about identification. I wonder if you could say a bit about how because people can identify birds. Of course, we've mostly talked about identifying them from what they look like, but of course they can also, a lot of them, be identified by their song. So I wonder if you could give some help on how people learn how to do that. Absolutely, yeah. So it's a really good question, because it's a really difficult thing, and people think, oh, I kind of bamboozled by it, and and it's great, this time of year you go out, if you wake up early and you hear the dawn chorus, it's a wonderful sound, but there's just so much going on in there. How do you kind of pick it all out? And my answer to your question, actually, Suan, is don't start with the dawn chorus. I think the best thing to do is actually, if you're going out and you're kind of wanting to learn birds by song, couple of things. One, there are now some great apps that you can use. There's a number of apps that you can use on your smartphone. Some of them have the songs so you can play them. So you can, if you hear something, you think, oh, was it that? If I saw a bird, was it that one that I was hearing? There are others that actually use artificial intelligence, and they actually you record the song that you're hearing. And as long as there isn't too much interference from other things, they're getting pretty good at identifying what the bird is. If you're going to do that, do make sure you're using a UK version, because obviously otherwise it's going to identify something in Indonesia. But I would say the best thing to do is actually start, round about now, well, start in the spring, because obviously the birds are really only singing in the spring. There's two things going on with birds. The songs
and there's calls. So the songs are the kind of more melodic, more musical, multi-noted tunes, which the birds are using. Mostly the males are using to establish their territory and to attract a female. There are some females that sing as well, but it is mostly males. Whereas the calls, which are the shorter notes and quite brief, those are where the birds are using those to contact each other or to raise an alarm. You know, most people will be familiar with the blackbird, the kind of alarm call, particularly in the evening. You know, or if there's a cat around or something, you kind of that staccato rattle. So if you go out in the early spring, then you can hear those songs before the leaves are on the trees. So you've got a good chance of actually being able to see the bird. And if you can associate the song with what you're seeing, that makes a massive difference, obviously. And also before the summer migrants arrive. Now, of course, now we're in early May. Lots of other birds have arrived from Africa, so blackcaps and chiffchaffs and willow warblers and whitethroats, and they're adding to that kind of cacophony, and that does make it much more difficult. So the thing to remember is maybe to think about this in about March next year, and if you do have to kind of concentrate, you do have to kind of think, oh yeah, I'm really going to make a bit of an effort this year to kind of learn some of these bird songs. But if you can do it, you will notice a lot more, because I probably, just thinking my typical bird track walk, I probably identified more by what I hear, or at least initially, and I'm attracted to it. I notice that it's there by what I hear than by what I see. And some of those surveys, like the Breeding Bird Survey, are pretty reliant on you being able to kind of clock the bird song, because that's how you record them. Yeah, if you do it get there in early, go out in early spring, get used to the resident species, because then you'll already have those in your memory bank when the summer migrants turn up and make it a bit more difficult.
And then you'll be able to recognise, oh, that's different.
Yeah, absolutely, that is. Yeah, and of course, with some species, there are little mnemonics, things like, the yellowhammer with a little bit of bread and no cheese. And there are some birds that call their own name. That's an easy cuckoo and chiffchaff, chiffchaff. So there are some quite nice, easy ones. There are birds that kind of are quite good at chucking in all sorts of songs. So song thrushes and starlings are both quite capable of mimicry. I remember when I was at Conwy, managing the reserve at Conwy, we'd had an avocet visit for a few days, and avocet's quite a rare bird in North Wales. It's the emblem of the RSPB, black and white bird with the upturned bill. Quite an unusual bird. These avocets, there were two of them, stayed for a few days and then disappeared. But the song thrush continued to call an avocet, chuck in an avocet call into its song for the rest of the summer, just because it had obviously heard it and picked it up. So there are things that can kind of throw and confuse like that. But the neat thing about these various apps is, and there's an online bird identifier as well, the RSPB website. If you type RSPB bird identifier into your favorite search engine, then you'll find this thing, and that's got recordings of all these birds on as well. So if you can associate the song and what it looks like together, then obviously you're kind of you're starting to get it together. But it does take a while. There's no quick fix, I'm afraid, to kind of learning it.
Oh, thanks. So also on identification, Ellie Wallace is asking about identifying different gulls. So this is something that's quite close to my heart, because I not long ago moved to the coast, so I'm trying to get my head around the different gulls myself. So is there any particular tips on that? I always find it confusing because they change as they grow. And
they are, yes. So although there aren't actually that many species that we have in the UK, there's kind of about 6 or 7 regularly occurring gull species, so it's not that many. The problem is that it takes the bigger gulls, things like herring gull and lesser blackback gull, it takes them 4 years to reach maturity. So they start off as a kind of fluffy speckled chick, where frankly, they pretty much all look the same. And then over the course of the 4 years, they grow and they molt and their plumage changes. So they go from and they have less and less speckle and more of their adult plumage, the sort of mostly grey and white. And that's what obviously makes it quite challenging and quite difficult. few things. There's one mega gull, which is the great black-backed gull, and that is huge. It's way bigger than anything else, and the black is it's properly black on the back. So I'm talking as an adult bird, but you can kind of go on size even when it's a lot of people think, oh, it's a small bird, so therefore it must be young. And of course, pretty much every bird is at its full size by the time it fledges from its nest. You know, forget water birds for the moment, because of course they leave the nest, you know, at a day or two old. But for birds that stay in their nests until they're ready to fly, then once they reach that size, that's as big as they're going to get. So even when you see a young bird, it's actually it's the full size it's ever going to be. So the great black-backed gulls are the big ones, and then the next two down, and these are the difficult ones perhaps, are herring gull and lesser black-backed gull. And lesser black-backed gull is a bit darker than a herring gull. So herring gull is a kind of a warm grey, a sort of a warm pale grey, and a lesser black-backed gull is a dark grey, almost leading to a charcoaly grey, probably about the same grey as my jumper actually. And then you've got a couple of smaller ones, common gull, which actually isn't very common. At all.
Never seen common gull. Yeah.
Nothing like as common, and they tend to be more winter visitors to the UK. And then the smallest one is the black-headed gull, which isn't black-headed, so it has a brown hood in the summertime, in the breeding season, and no hood at all, just a little black browny mark just behind the eye in the wintertime. So there's no quick way other than just watching them and getting used to them. But because there's only 6 or 7 species, you know, once you get to know the ones that you see that live around you, then again you'll be able to pick out the different ones. But getting to know the different ages is why even some birders go, gulls.
Yeah, it's supposed to be my summer attempt to get better at gulls, but I don't know whether it will work or not. We'll see. Yes, yeah. So of course, if anyone fancies practicing bird ID and can't get out and about so much, you can always have a look at the iNaturalist photographs that we've made for City Nature Challenge, and have a look at the photographs and sounds also, because you can upload sounds onto City Nature Challenge and have a go helping identify them. And of course, that also helps improve the data quality and eventually get through to some of these amazing monitoring schemes we have. So any other difficult groups of birds which is best to kind of maybe just avoid, or perhaps, I mean, is there a level which it can be useful to identify birds to a certain level? Do they have to be species level identification? With insects, we often say, oh, family level is good enough sometimes. And that's not.
Yeah, to be honest with you, for birds, you kind of do need that need that to species level, and that's doable for most things. Where it does get tricky with particularly buntings. You know, buntings are your kind of archetypal LBJ, you know, the little brown job. They're kind of streaky things, particularly the females, and obviously the females tend to do most of the sitting on the nests, so they need to be, you know, quite well camouflaged and not too showy, whereas the males are kind of much you know, maybe have more colors or more striking plumage. And the buntings can be difficult, you know. What I would say is, and it kind of goes for anything really, is don't be afraid to get things wrong, but also don't be afraid to kind of ask for help. And the great thing about the kind of communities, the online communities like iNaturalist and local Facebook groups and whatever, is that you know, there'll be people there who will be able to help. I'm a member of a local Facebook group up here, and it's brilliant because, you know, there's some people who are really knowledgeable, and there's people who are just starting out, and there are people who, you know, some people post, you know, meadow pipit pictures or dunnock in their garden, and, you know, people you know, when they first see those, they don't actually, you know, don't know what they are. But once someone's told you what something is, then actually you're much more likely to remember that. If someone's explained why it's a meadow pipit and not a rock pipit, that's, you know, you could read it in a book, but it's somehow better when someone is kind of giving you some one-to-one advice on that on an online community, and those are the sorts of things that you can kind of remember, you know, more likely to remember. I put myself in another someone else's shoes, because I really want to get better at botany. My knowledge of wildflowers is really not what it should be, but Twitter is great. And there's a wildflower hour on Twitter on Sunday evening, and I learn so much from that, because people put up pictures and then it gives me a bit of a search image, and then I might be out the following week and I'll see it and I go, oh, I know what that is. And I'm sure that probably applies with birds as well. You know, if you get involved with an online community, a local Facebook group, because you see these pictures, and as long as people say what they are and maybe explain why it is, I think that kind of gives you that search image, so that next time you're walking the dog and you see that, you see it, oh yeah, I know, oh, I remember what that was. So, you know, it's about just picking up those clues and cues, just as part of your kind of everyday life, really.
Yeah, I think you're right. I know when I recently moved to the coast, I got out my old bird books and just started reading through them in the evenings and just kind of reminding myself what they look like. And when I was out, it was like, oh yes, I've seen you. You're on that page somewhere. And it just kind of helped me kind of get back, and it just gets that kind of image in your head, I think. There's
also some really good videos, and I'd be on YouTube, obviously, but I'd particularly give a shout out to the BTO, British for Ornithology. Have got a series of identification videos that they've produced over recent years, and it helps with sort of confusion species. So like some of the little wading birds, or the buntings, or sparrows, or you know, the difference between a wood pigeon and a stock dove, where there's kind of similar looking or similar sounding species like blackcap and garden warbler. And there's some really good videos online which you can kind of use. And again, if you're not sure, or you know, maybe watch them before you go out into an area where you're expecting to see those sorts of species.
Yeah, great. It's amazing how many different resources there are out there. Like,
there is, absolutely. No, there is. And I mean, the bird identification app I use is actually, it is one you pay for, but it's called the Collins Bird Guide. So I've been using the book for years. I mean, this is very well funded, but you know, and I used to take it out with me. Now I don't take it out with me because the book's on my phone. But better than that is all the songs and calls are on my phone as well. So if I kind of hear something and I think, oh, I'm not sure, I can kind of just check that. And this afternoon, I discovered, while looking at it this afternoon, I discovered that it's got a brilliant search function, which I hadn't realized was quite as good as it is. So you can type in the habitat that you're in, the color of its head, blah, 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 all the different possibilities. And it's like a key, like a kind of old-fashioned key, but you type in the things against particular features that you can see or that you've heard, and it will suggest some options. And then you can then go on and click the song or the call and listen to it. So they're really powerful, some of these apps, more powerful than I've probably really made best use of them.
Yeah, I have to give that a go. I'm afraid when I'm out and I hear a bird song, and I often think, oh, I'll look that up when I get home. But by the time I got home, I've forgotten what it sounded like. And
absolutely, it's much better to do it. Much better to do it in the field. I remember a few years ago hearing a really odd chiffchaff, and it was in the late winter before they would be turning up. And I thought, I wonder if it's a Siberian chiffchaff. I wonder if I can get Siberian chiffchaff on my phone. I found it, and that's what it is. And I couldn't see it very well, but it was chiffchaff-like, but there was something weird about it. So I just tried that as a bit of a punt, and it's exactly what it was. So, yeah. So being able to record things on your phone is really good. There's a guy called Ben Porter, a friend of mine called Ben Porter, who, if you Google plant pot parabolic, he's basically used a mobile phone and a plant pot to sort of create a sound recording device that he can use out in the field. And by recording those things, the plant pod obviously focuses the sound, and so he's able to make good recordings, and then obviously you can play them back and run them through various things online, which will help you identify these.
Yeah, I've got a colleague who's done something similar with a dustbin lid and a microphone with it.
Yeah.
So get the sound better. So we're just coming up to our time, but I just wanted to ask last question about kind of what is your highlight this year so far, or is there anything particular you're hoping to see this year in the kind of bird world?
Well, like many people, I guess. Obviously, I've not been out, haven't been out very much because lockdown was through to the middle of March. I've just been able to get out, but I went out last week and did a black grouse survey. And a black grouse is this quite relatively unusual bird. It's an upland bird. The males have this amazing display called a lek, where they gather round and they hop up and down and they fan their tail feathers and they make this amazing bubbling noise. And it's a few years since I've seen and heard black grouse. So we were doing a survey. I didn't know whether I would get any on the particular bit of moorland that I'd been allocated. So to be there at 5:15 in the morning was freezing cold and not, barely light. And to be able to hear that sound coming across the valley was just brilliant. And then I heard a cuckoo, and then as the sun rose, skylarks were singing, and just being there in that moment was really special. As I say, for a bird that sadly has become far too rare. Well, the cuckoo has as well, but to be able to hear the black grouse was just very, very special.
Oh, that's a brilliant place to end on. Thank you so much for coming along and talking to us, Julian. And thanks everyone for listening. And please do check out the UK BioBlitz Facebook page. We've got some more nature chats coming up, and you can also view back the ones you might have missed. And have a go at identifying sightings on iNaturalist for this year's City Challenge. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks everyone. And thanks, Julian. Bye.
Bye-bye.